Hello everyone, this is Amanda Hellman and I'm doing my case study presentation on Candy Montgomery, and we are going to be looking at her and how that applies to general strain theory. Candy Montgomery was born in 1950 in Kansas. She is known for murdering her neighbor Betty Gore, who was also her friend. At the time, she attacked her with an axe and brutally stabbed her 41 times. This was very shocking and unexpected. Candy was just a regular housewife. She was a mother. Her and Betty's children would play together. They regularly attended church together. She was an upper middle class person in the 80s, just a stereotypical housewife. Her and Betty were very close until Candy started having an affair with Betty Gore's husband. And when Candy started the affair, it started fairly casual and worked into something more. And at that point in time, she went to confront Betty at her home, and there was an argument. And out of that argument, she wound up murdering Betty. Now I'm going to speak a little bit about strain theory, and then I'm going to tie this to the specific Candy Montgomery case. Strain theory is derived from Emil Durkheim's original theory of anomie. Anomie is basically the self or selfishness. The person who translated this into strain theory or came up with strain theory was Merton. He felt that it wasn't necessarily the individual person who was at fault, but it was society and the social structure that was causing people to cause crimes. The expectations of goals and just the general societal expectations were where the true problems lie. And that when people are under pressure of these goals and expectations, they tend to resort to crime. Sometimes people do conform to the standards of society, but oftentimes they rebel, as was the case with Candy Montgomery. A little bit more on Candy herself, just to reiterate, she was a homemaker in the 1980s. And as somebody who was born in the 50s and who was a homemaker in the 80s, there were certain expectations of her to clean the house, to tend to the children, and as well, divorce was pretty frowned upon during this time frame. She got bored of these social norms, these expectations and goals, and she had an affair with Betty Gore's husband. This was very against the social norm at the time. This was very frowned upon, especially because Candy Montgomery and Betty Gore were part of a suburban community. They were big churchgoers, and the affair was a big taboo. And there was a lot of pressure on Candy to be the perfect housewife, or what was perceived to be the perfect housewife by society during that point in time. After Candy was caught for the murder of Betty, she actually turned herself in after a while, but when she was speaking to the police, she described it to them as an incident where she just snapped. She initially went with a self-defense defense. She claimed that Betty attacked her first when she went to confront her about the affair with Betty's husband, but later on she went on to describe herself as just snapping. She was ultimately acquitted of any charges. They weren't able to prove that it wasn't self-defense, but much of her interview indicated that the pressures of being a housewife and being in a marriage where she wasn't happy and she felt like she couldn't leave, and the societal expectations of her to be the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect churchgoer just got to her, and then she wound up committing that murder as a result. So just to reiterate, Candy did have a lot of pressure and strain on herself being a housewife in the 80s, being kind of bored in her situation, not very happy, not very satisfied, but still being expected to stay in that situation. Her goal and aspiration was just to be a good wife and a good mother, and that wasn't really satisfying her. So that's how the strain theory ultimately applies to this, is she felt the strain and the pressure of what people would think of her if she got a divorce or if she didn't fulfill the role that she was supposed to fulfill. This caused her to feel not only stuck, but very disconnected emotionally. This caused her to get up in the scandal of the affair. And she ultimately was using the rebellion technique to adapt to those expectations and those goals that were put before her. And these are my references, and thank you everybody for watching my presentation.